Hi class, here are the 10 key terms for the chapter on the nature and extent of crime. I want you to know that the Uniform Crime Report, the UCR, is generated by the FBI. Data comes from 17,000 plus police departments, measures homicides and arrests, and it's a consistent national sample. Its weakness is that it omits crimes that are not reported to the police, because it collects from police departments. And less than half of all violent crimes and 1/3 of property crimes are reported. Also, this report omits most drug use and contains some reporting errors. It's important to note, if you look up the UCR and the NIBRS at the government websites, you'll see that they're making effort to have the UCR collect a lot more data. The data actually that's collected in the National Incident-Based Reporting System as of January 1st, 2021. The textbook doesn't note this, and you won't be quizzed on it, so not to worry. The National Incident-Based Reporting System, NIBRS, again, the FBI, collects data on every incident and arrest in 49 specified offenses. It includes the offense, the victim, the offender, the property, and the arrestee data. Historically has been much more data here available than the UCR. Its weakness is that not all law enforcement are participating. Only about 35%, or 6,520 law enforcement agencies, covering only 93 million of the nation's inhabitants, participate in the NIBRS. There are about 335 million people in the U.S., so clearly, there's a lot of people are being missed here. I also want you to know about the National Crime Victimization Study, the NCVS. That's federal government-sponsored study by the Justice Department and the Census Bureau that surveys victims about their experience. It's a large national survey. It includes crimes not reported to the police. It uses careful sampling techniques. You couldn't survey all 335 million of us. And it's yearly. One of its weaknesses is it relies on the victims' memories and their honesty. And how much would anyone report about crimes that they had actually committed? It omits substance abuse. That's a weakness. And its format is really somewhat awkward. Let's just leave it at that. They survey about 90,000 to 120,000 households, and they have this amazing response rate, 82%, sometimes in the high 70s. And people criticize this when the average response for a survey is like 3%. I mean, they really get good response. There's also self-reporting surveys, another way that we find out about crime, and that's data from local surveys. It includes non-reported crimes, it can include substance abuse, and it can include offenders' personal information. The weakness of the self-reported surveys, which come from all sorts of places, it's not federal government, they rely again on the honesty of the people who commit the crimes, and they do not include the incarcerated. You're going to be using another kind of data set, which is observational and interview research. When criminologists interview a few subjects in depth or observe them as they go about their activity, you're not going to be observing, you're just going to be interviewing. This research often results in in-depth data that large-scale surveys cannot yield. Again, you'll be doing this for your final paper. The next key term I'd like you to know is racial profiling, a form of institutional racism where police initiate action directed at a suspect or group of suspects based solely on race. I'd like you to know the term instrumental crimes. Instrumental crimes are things like theft. Their goal is to provide desired goods and services that cannot be obtained through legitimate economic means. I'd also like you to know about expressive crimes. Those are such as rape and assault. I'd like you to know the difference between an instrumental and an expressive crime. An expressive crime is an offense committed not for profit or gain, but to vent rage or anger or frustration. Interesting distinction, not often thought of. I'd also like you to know that aging out is a phrase used to express the fact that people commit fewer crimes as they mature. They commit less crimes. The peak age for property crime is 16, for violent crime, 18. I'd also like you to know the term cleared crimes. Those are crimes that can happen. Let me fix that. Cleared crimes can happen in two ways. When at least one person is arrested, charged, and turned over to the court for prosecution, or by exceptional means when something happens beyond police control, such as if the offender leaves the country, then they can't be arrested. About half of all violent crimes and 20% of property crimes are cleared by arrest each year. I'd also like you to know the term, just going to add one more, chronic offenders. Chronic offenders. Chronic offenders, also known as career criminals. That's the small group of persistent offenders who account for a majority of all criminal offenses. So you already know that 2 out of 3 people who leave prison end up going back, right? According to research by Marvin Wolfgang and his team, that about 6% of criminals commit more than half the crimes. They commit 3/4 of the rapes, 82% of the robberies. 6% of criminals commit more than half the crimes. And the strange thing is, and this is interesting and worth considering, the harder they're punished, the more likely they are to repeat the crime. Worth considering. I'd also like you to consider 2 cliches that the textbook addresses. One, that crime is out of control. Please know that crime rates are significantly lower than they were 20 or even almost 30 years ago, actually more. Crime's pretty much gone down in the United States since 1991. Crime rate was hugely much higher in the 19th century. Hugely much higher in the 1800s. Think about this. In the United States, 43,000 people a year die from gun violence. 23,000 of those acts are suicide. In Canada, the death rate from gun violence for the last 20 years, between 134 and 300 people. So what are we doing here? That's something to think about. I don't have the answer. The other thing I want you to think about is the thing addressed in the textbook, this cliche that immigrants cause crime. Immigrants are much less likely to commit crime. Anyone who says they're more likely is lying. Immigrants have very low crime rates. Immigration helps reduce crime in the area where the immigrants come. And I'd like you to think about who benefits from the lies about this matter. Thank you, class, and have a great day.